current time is now 7:27 p.m. here in Seoul, South Korea. It's time for Made in Korea. And joining us in the program is Professor John Demoya. Professor Demoya, Happy New Year to you.
Thanks very much. Happy New Year. Good to see you in this new year.
Any New Year's resolutions?
I just got asked that. So funny, just outside. Honestly, nothing special. Just continue to work and enjoy. And honestly, I cannot complain. My life here is pretty good.
That's awesome to say. That is awesome. To say that life is so good right now.
I'm not going to go that far. But I'm just saying I have no huge issues.
You know, just swimming in money and
no. Let's be. But no, I like my classes. I like the people I work with. I like my apartment. I generally get up in the morning and I'm like, cool. I get to hang out and I get to harass students and force them to listen to me.
No, it's good to see you. Finally, I mean, optimism is good. I mean, we've been kind of lagging on optimism these days with all the things that's going on.
Sure.
It's good to see you again. This year, 2025, marks 80 years since the Korean independence.
That is correct.
Right, 1945 to 2025. Granted, it would officially be in August of this year, but being that 2025 just a symbolic year when it comes to independence of Korea, we're going to be honoring several independent activists who basically, to say the least, sacrificed their life for the pursuit of independence and the freedom of the Korean people during the Japanese colonial times. And I would say that if you go out into the streets of Korea, right, and ask somebody, if you could name one independence activist, who would it be? I would say maybe 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree.
9 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10.
He has such a visible presence, and then the number of films to go along with the present one have made him a media presence besides the cultural presence.
Yeah, I would say Jung-geun would be a name that would be brought up 9 times out of 10. We'll talk about some of the other independence activists in this 4-part series, ladies and gentlemen. But we're going to talk about how Jung-geun and why was he so important in shaping the independence of Korea. First and foremost, let's go to the early to mid 19th century.
Sure.
Wow, we're going back here.
Yeah, well, this is what historians do.
What was the state of Japanese-Korean relations back then?
I don't want to say they were good, but certainly the way people usually write about it is that with Meiji in the 1860s, that's when Japan begins to really start feeling its power. And of course, this will have huge impact on both Taiwan and Korea. So I would say at mid-century, late Tokugawa, Korea and Japan have been at peace basically since the Imjinwei run in the 17th century. It's a period of, let's say, 1640s, 1650s, well until the middle of the 19th century, so almost 200 years. And then suddenly, because of Western colonial powers coming in, Japan getting ambitions, China and Russia also looking around, it becomes, as Koreans know, a very tense period where Japan will be the main antagonist, but certainly there are others also.
Mind you, before this, though, before the time, the period of peace, let's just put it at that.
Yes, there are issues as well, but yes.
Hundreds and hundreds of years of just, I mean, come on now.
No, it's just, you were correct. It's just that people usually write about that period in between as kind of a nice lull from roughly the middle, the 1750s until about the 1840s, 1850s.
I mean, we could even go even further. We could even go even further, right? I mean, with all the things that were going on, because at that time, I mean, we're going back hundreds and hundreds of years ago right now. I mean, it was all about who gets the most land, right? I mean, that's what it was back then.
Yeah.
And so being that Korea...
And then, of course, with colonial powers coming in, not only making sure you don't give up your own land, but potentially, as with Japan, seizing other people's land and increasing your stock.
Yeah, exactly. And so then we don't want
to be colonized, and at the same time, we're going to help you, so let us have yours.
Right. And so that brief time of just kind of lull and the time of peace, all of a sudden, boom, everything calms all at once. Let's talk about what other countries played a role in increasing tensions in Northeast Asia for this time period, though.
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, again, I'm not an expert on, certainly on Tsarist Russia, nor on Qing China. But as we know, the Qing Chinese do not get formally colonized with the Opium Wars, but they also, and will ultimately have, the change to republic coming in the early 20th century, but they having been through the UK coming there, have their own struggles and issues. And then most importantly, the Tsar definitely wants a non-frozen water access port, and that's part of the reason you have all of those struggles between the Japanese, the Russians, and the Chinese. And then I guess most interesting, and I didn't know this until I started teaching this a couple years ago, technically the Russian border with that little place where they all meet up in Northeast Asia is actually not formalized until some point in the 1850s, 1860s. So they're all kind of lobbying and saying, like, could you move that line down a couple hundred meters? And they actually, this has a lot to do with, if you think in Korean terms, Koreans used to be able to go freely into Russia and get like timber and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. This is the line with the Russian formally saying, yeah, don't do that anymore. And there's a formal border there.
Yeah, you have to understand, like...
Yeah, the borders were much looser until the middle of the 19th century.
And also, I mean, we talk about how everyone's trying to take over South Korea and things. It could be right.
Korea, but yeah.
Everyone's trying to take over Korea. That's what it was. I mean, they were getting basically attacked, trying to get invaded from every side here
because of access to
water.
Yeah, exactly. Water imports.
Because back then, I mean, we didn't have airplanes doing all the shipments. I mean, still, even till this day, there's a lot of ships that's doing most of the brunt of the transporting and things like that. And so when you have Korea there, kind of at the dead center of the water.
Today, post-1970, major container ports at Busan and Incheon.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk about why 1876 is regarded as a critical kind of moment for the shifting relations between the two countries.
Sure, this is the way I learned it, although there are variations, but this is the Kanghwa Treaty. This is when the Japanese, quote-unquote, open up the Koreans. It's probably for Koreans the most famous of the unequal treaties that they get burdened with. So for better or worse, and again, there are people who also suggest slightly alternative viewpoints, but 1876 is generally regarded as kind of Japan making it really official that they have every intention of intervening and doing so on a major basis.
Yeah. By the way, also, the notorious Ursa Treaty. I know we talked about the 80th anniversary of Korean independence. This year also marks 120th year.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Of the Korea-Japan Treaty, also known as the Ursa Treaty, which basically
solidifies the colonial rule.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, it kind of all kind of comes in together here. But let's go into our main character of the day here. Again, probably the most recognizable name in Korean history, probably the most recognizable name when it comes to Korean independence fighters, An Jung-geun. Who was An Jung-geun?
Sure. An Jung-geun dates are 1879 to obviously, the incident is 1909, then he is dealt with in 1910. He is famous in particularly, as we'll talk in more detail, for the killing of Ito Hirobumi. But before that, and what gets him there is he is seen as an independence activist. He is, I believe, a Catholic, and so there's a religious aspect to it.
Right.
And then I guess most interesting, and this is where we can talk about this a little bit, he is a Korean hero, but because he is a Pan-Asianist and because he is anti-Japanese, he is viewed favorably. Particularly, you will see things in China. I mean, Harbin, it's not so, but occasionally. And then, of course, North Korea also recognizes him as well, which is kind of funny. But they do see him as a different kind of Korean activist.
Right. Well, I mean, they will always consider Kim Il-sung as the number one independence activist, right?
But nonetheless, they recognize that this was a contribution.
They'll definitely recognize. I mean, because also given the fact that at that time...
He was anti-Japanese, he's good.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, we're talking about a unified Korea at the time.
Yes, the Korean Peninsula, exactly.
And even till this day, I mean, North Korea absolutely hates Japan. And so, I mean, you're talking about the most recognizable name in independence fighting.
That's actually very visible in much of their propaganda. It's the U.S. and Japan. And if you read the Korean, it's funny to see how 1945 has not gone away in their consciousness.
Let's talk about how he's viewed, again, going into the views, where we talked about how North Korea sort of views An Jung-geun.
Yeah.
But how's he viewed in other countries in Northeast Asia?
I can't speak to Russia, but I will say that China seems to be the place where definitely there are little museums and little places dedicated to his life there. So I don't know that I would say that they embrace him in the same way that Koreans do as a hero, but certainly he is recognized, again, as a Pan-Asianist, as an anti-Japanese figure. And I don't even know if this is the PRC or whether it goes back, obviously, to the Qing of the Republic, but he's recognized as someone who was in China and helped China fight off Western influence. And Japanese influence.
again, I mean, when we talk about what Jung-geun did to sort of solidify his legacy as the most recognizable name in Korea's history, and also when it comes to Korea's independence. Again, Ito Hirobumi comes up. We'll talk about that in just a bit.
Sure.
But what did An do that is critical to his celebrated status in Korea, though? Other than this.
Other than this. Oh, yeah, sure. Besides, again, being a religious figure, he definitely did... leading up to the killing of Ito Hirobumi, things where he was seen as, I know the best way to say this, he saw himself as an independence fighter, and in fact, when he gets tried later, he tries specifically not to be tried for the incident, but as a soldier in the independence army or a guerrilla army. So very much what the kinds of activities you would expect of someone who is, like many Koreans at the time, colonialism is coming, but you're sort of outside the nation doing what you can to prevent what comes in 1910. Failing to do so, but trying.
Yeah. So, I remember when I was early years of coming to Korea, right? And I'm just starting broadcasting in Korea.
Sure.
And, when you start off in broadcasting, there's not a whole lot of money. And so, I got to teach English. Right?
Okay. I'm well familiar with this.
Right? Part-time teaching English and things like that. And I remember when kids used to diss other kids, right? They would call them like Ito Hirobumi.
Okay, that's funny. I
remember, when we
I get it.
Okay, like it's a little bit different.
I get it. You're kind of evil and you're kind of pro-Japanese and
so they think of like the worst. Like I'll talk about this too. The worst than that is like Iwan Young, who is largely basically the Benedict Arnold of Korea is Iwan Young, and so that's like the worst of the name that you could do. The other name would be like Ito Hirobumi. Let's talk about who Ito Hirobumi is, and what was the South Manchurian Railroad Company?
Yeah, and this is the really interesting thing. Ito Hirobumi is the resident general for Japan at that time. When he comes to the station at Harbin, where this will take place, he has just been negotiating with the Russians. And to give you the larger context, the South Manchurian Railroad Company is essentially the Japanese, I think it's connected to the government. I don't think it's all private capital, but I could check on that. Anyway, it's the company that is expanding the railroads throughout Northeast Asia. And if you know the circumstances for the borders, this is in essence, it sounds like just a railroad, but it's not. This is the Japanese Empire building those railroads, being able to move their stuff all over Manchuria, which leads to not only intervention into Korea now, the time we're talking about, but obviously later in the 20s and 30s, China, exactly. So with the railroads, but these railroad links are absolutely critical to Japanese ambitions. You can think of like someone almost sitting there on the map throwing darts and a wider and wider rail network. And the Russians and Chinese know this. It's famous that they're not happy about it, which is why they're negotiating. But so to get back to sum that up, Hirobumi is a resident general. He's a negotiator. But being a railroad guy, he is as core and in the heart of Japanese empire as you can be, although it's that you need the context of what those railroads are doing.
A resident general would be equivalent to what nowadays?
I assume when I see that line, resident general, I assume that means resident general in the sense that he's not yet formally the governor general. I assume he's the one of the highest, if not the highest, Japanese representatives in Korea. But obviously you don't get a formal GGK governor general until 10.
Right, exactly. And so I think in previous episodes, we talked about the importance of having railroads in an area. And then, I think it was you who we talked about when you play the game of Monopoly.
Yeah,
right?
My brother.
There's always 4 railways that you want to get.
Because you get the 200 hours if you have all 4. Right. And I remember my brother always saying, if you get all 4 of this, you don't realize how many times you're going to get 200 hours.
But I'm telling you right now, you learn a lot from that game. And back in the days, having control of the railroad.
Someone who grew up on the East Coast, I've been to Atlantic City even pre-gambling, and I learned all the streets, and
Yeah, and so,
I'm old enough to remember pre-gambling.
Not only are you transporting people, you're transporting weapons and supplies and goods and things like that. And you're really trying to expand. And goodness, it's called South Manchurian Railroad Company.
It's everything from Harbin, and that's why the railroad station makes perfect sense, all the way down to Busan. And if you think later, moving to the early 20th century, prior to the airplane, more second half of after 45, the rails connect to the ships, and this is how the Japanese Empire gets from Fukuoka to Busan to Seoul, all the way up into the interior of China. We forget that you used to be able to take the train all the way into China and Russia. Obviously, North Korea stopped that after 45.
We know the story of what happened, right? With Jung-geun able to fire several shots Ito Hirobumi dies.
Yeah.
And this all happened at a train station.
Yeah, October, I don't remember the exact date, but yeah, it's October 1909. And it's especially, to everything we've just said, it's Jung-geun, although the debate's about whether he did this, but seeing as this is a railroad guy, he's negotiating with the Russians, I have to put a stop to this.
Yeah.
By killing him, I am in essence putting a major impediment to Japanese colonialism. Now there are people who argue both ways. Some will say he slowed it down. Some will say he accelerated it because you remove the guy, you replace him with someone else who was even more, diabolical.
Yeah. Because, you put a hold to it, and we're going to just try to really
It
railroad
didn't
this.
work, but his intentions were well. He figured by removing the individual, you could destroy the negotiations.
Made it up, says SJ taught English. I'm pretty sure he made up a word earlier, colonyist. I didn't say colonist.
I didn't hear that, but
Colonist.
I have plenty of stories for another time about teaching English, as we all do.
Did An have any beliefs which sort of complicated his status as a Korean hero?
This is the most interesting thing. I don't think it makes him controversial, but definitely those Koreans, and I don't want to make anyone upset, so I'll be careful here, who see him as a national hero, they're correct. But again, the fact that he is seen positively in North Korea, possibly also in China, he's definitely a Pan-Asianist. What he really wants by killing Hirobumi is removing Japanese influence, and also, that is in Korea, and also removing the possibility of Western colonial influence. So in theory, obviously, besides China appreciating him, there must be some Japanese who weren't on board with the Meiji Imperial Project, who might, in theory, also be, you know what I mean? Like if there were some more liberal Japanese, they might also. But he's more complicated than he's often made out to be. He's a hero, but he's more than that.
I know why you're cautious with this, because some will argue if you have links with I'm not, and this is not my words, ladies and gentlemen.
No, exactly. Me too.
And I'm just going to clarify this right now. Not our words, but when you have links to North Korea, when you have links to China, some people are going to say that An Jung-geun was a communist.
Exactly.
Right.
Not
true.
Or at the very least that he did things that were outside of the Korean purview, which he should not have done.
Right. And so when you say that there are certain Japanese who shared his view, they're going to be called a commie, right?
Yeah.
And so again,
I'll say the safest thing I can say is he was a Pan-Asianist. He really believed that China, Japan, Korea should resist Western outside forces and should not try to colonize each other. And but
I'll tell you this though. You know how in the world right now, where if you are a liberal, like if you're a liberal, if you have a liberal political view here in South Korea, like
you're a little bit different.
The conservatives will call you commie and stuff like that.
Sure.
I think even the conservatives, right, no matter how right wing of a conservative you are, I don't think they'll say bad about
An is pretty much untouchable as far as I can see.
Yeah, you can't. And so the reason why we were cautious with this whole thing is because there are some people who viewed it this way only because of the positive views that North Korea and China had on An Jung-geun, but it was based on his legacy. On what basis was An tried? Of course, he was arrested. He was put to trial.
He's tried for the murder. The reason I'm bringing this question up is he very specifically contests that. He doesn't contest that he did it. He contests that the basis of it was as a soldier in the Independence Army. Therefore, I should be tried as a soldier, as a military person. And I imagine that opens up a whole set of new legal issues. And they just do not accept this at all.
No, they're not going to do that.
No, but he, in other words, what he's trying to do is he's trying to get some probably heroic recognition for his deed.
I have to say that a lot of what was happening within the prisons, we don't know obviously what was going on. We can only speculate.
Were not that bad. Good.
Oh
probably,
no,
yeah.
I mean, I've heard as far as to say. I mean, there was definitely torturing going on, right? But also what his mother, had told him, I believe.
Okay.
I believe they were saying that. Oh, she said that she's not going to cry for her son.
Okay.
Because he's not being, again, he eventually does get executed.
Right, but he's done something presumably heroic and something to be validated for, not to be saddened about.
No, and I think she was a very, very strong person. I can almost say, although she's not officially known as amongst like the well-known independence fighters and so forth, you can judge by some of the things that she said in regards to her son and the trial and the execution of An Jung-geun that, again, she did not shed a single tear, apparently.
Interesting.
But he was also known as a very talented calligrapher.
Yes. There are still collections, I believe, on whatever they've preserved on exhibit in different places, and yes.
And obviously the very well-known sign.
Exactly. Of the handprint
the hand, which
in blood.
You have basically part of his finger.
Yes.
cut off.
Which fits what the story's in, yeah.
Yeah, and then you often see this as a decal in some of the
I was saying,
the
there
cars.
was a movie a couple years ago that was the poster, was the hand and obviously the symbol of the blood.
Yeah.
Not
Very
the
well
current
known.
movie, of course.
The thing with Jung-geun now is that, and still very sad, I guess, the outcome of all this is that Korea was never returned. He never was able to return. We don't know where. Okay.
Yes.
I believe the Japanese government probably knows.
That is another issue. And I checked on the on the wiki today. What that says is, well, there's no cooperation, which is a polite way of saying we don't know. But yeah.
Well, I mean,
but yes, he said, if Korea reunifies, I would like my body to be returned once the nation has been solidified again. And that has not happened.
Because the controversy is Japan is saying, well, we don't know where it is.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know where his body is.
And they may not want to know.
And other side is saying they do know.
Okay.
But they do not want to return.
Yeah, they don't want to give fuel to Korean nationalism. And
right, exactly.
I can give you it's a little bit off the topic, but I'll give you a similar situation. The joke among my friends who do film studies, particularly like Arirang film, which everyone knows there were copies but no longer exist, is that if there are any copies, they're probably in a house in Kobe or Osaka somewhere. And it may even be that the 90-year-old Japanese guy doesn't know that it's in his attic and you have to wait for the family to dig into the attic. Yeah. There's lots of stuff still in Japan that it's just for a variety of reasons not known about.
Are there, made it up says, are there any decent films or dramas about the Jung-geun?
Oh, yeah, lots.
A lot.
I mean, obviously, you see Harbin, and I apologize, I can't remember the one from just about 4 or 5 years ago, but it had the handprint.
Hero. I believe the English title was Hero.
You're right. There's been at least 2 or 3 since I've been here in the last 8 or 10 years.
Is it called Hero? I believe that's what it's called.
Yeah,
and so the movie was so
correct.
successful that they have a musical for this, right? And then Harbin is the new one that came out.
I imagine if you go to IMDb and you just put it in Korean, you'll find probably a dozen.
Yeah,
his life has been filmed many times.
Absolutely, made it up. I mean, many. Also, there's a lot of like historical dramas. Like
and then it even pops up in weird things. Like if you've ever seen that movie, what is the name of it? The one that's a science fiction film, something where he doesn't die and they go back in time.
Oh, is it like a
something
Doctor
lost?
Who kind of a thing?
Something lost memories. Anyway, it's a Korean thing where counterfactually he doesn't die, and Korea in the 20th century, in the early 21st century, is still under Japanese colonial rule.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's sci-fi. Something lost memories.
That sounds actually pretty interesting.
It was around the time I was a grad student. Yeah, it's crazy because it's totally historical, but it's fun.
Okay, there you have it. So I think you could, Hero. I think the Hero is the popular one.
That's also one. Yeah, I would recommend that. Yeah.
Professor De Moya, thank you very much. This is going to be a 4-part series. We have 3 more weeks of this. Until then, again, Happy New Year to you, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks very much.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application, or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.